So like Serene said, I'm Katie Hickok. I'm a registered dietitian and a family and consumer science educator in Bannock County, and that's in Pocatello, Idaho. So I don't know about you, but I'm really excited about beans. And I hope you all leave with some new information and maybe some inspiration to make some beans at your house. All right. So I'm planning to talk about the health benefits of beans. I'll give a brief lesson on human digestion and how we can add more beans to our diet. And then I'll demonstrate how to make a bean burger. So first off, the benefits of beans. I really like beans because they are high in fiber and protein. They're a pretty affordable source of both fiber and protein, and they last a long time on our shelves, so they have a great shelf life. In addition, they help you stay at a healthy weight because of all that fiber. And then the vitamins and minerals. So beans are a rich source of iron, and then magnesium. So about 1 cup of beans, this is an average, provides about 1/3 of what you need in a day of magnesium. Beans also have potassium and zinc. The zinc amount provides you with, or 1 cup of beans provides you with about 1/4 cup of what you need in a day. And then folate provides 2 times the amount of folate you need in a day. So 1 cup of beans packs a lot of nutritional benefits. Also, adding beans to your diet can reduce risks of cancer, high blood pressure, heart disease, and diabetes. Many of you probably have heard about a complete protein. If you have a vegetarian friend, you might have heard the complete protein. Well, that's because beans lack a particular type of amino acid. And so it's important to eat beans with a type of grain. Grains have the complementary amino acid. So eating beans and rice would create a complete protein. When beans are eaten by themselves, they're lacking that amino acid. So they won't serve your body like a complete protein would. Next up is the wonderful, many of you, so beans are great. I love beans, but they also give me some gas. And so we'll talk about gas a little bit and how to prevent gas while cooking. So the 2 of the main reasons why we get gas: we swallow air, chewing gum, and using straws can contribute to more gas. And then bacteria breakdown of undigested food can cause gas. And so when we eat more fiber, inevitably, you'll have some gas. When we add more fiber to our diet, it'll be temporary, or the gas will be temporary. So this is because bacteria colonies in our guts are not as prevalent. So when we do introduce more fiber into our diet, we're going to be gassy. But again, it's temporary. So as you eat more fiber, your body starts creating more bacteria because there's a need for it. Most Americans only eat about 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day, when it's recommended to have about 25 grams for women and 30 grams for men. So increasing fiber is really important for us, and beans is a great way to do it. So how we do it, how I recommend doing it, is slowly incorporate more fiber into your diet. So you can even start with a small tablespoon of beans, add it to your salad, add it to a smoothie, and then slowly go up to about a cup of beans a day. I'll talk about how to incorporate a cup of beans a day towards the end of the presentation. Why do we get gas? We get gas because of these carbohydrates called oligosaccharides. They are a chain of monosaccharides, so galactose, glucose, and fructose make this particular oligosaccharide called raffinose, and that's a common oligosaccharide in beans. We lack the enzyme to digest or break down these types of oligosaccharides. So what happens is these carbohydrates, they go undigested into our lower gut, and that's where it is fermented by anaerobic bacteria. And that's what causes our cramping and our flatulence and all those really fun things that happen when you eat beans. So one of the ways to reduce this is to address this particular oligosaccharide situation. I'll talk about that in a moment, but there are things on the market called Beano or Gas-X. They work in two different ways. Beano has that alpha galactosidase enzyme that we lack and can help prevent episodes of flatulence. And then there's Gas-X, which works by breaking down those gas bubbles. And so when we do end up having gas, it's not as intense. The research is pretty poor. It's not significant. These aren't significant products and you can't depend on these, but they do help some people. So if you do have a lot of gas after eating beans, but you want to eat more beans, you could try it and see if it works for your body, but it's hard to say that it'll work or not. Another thing I wanted to talk about. So are there beans that are better for our diet, like for our bodies that have less gas? Yes, there are beans that produce less gas. And those are beans that are not common in our diet here in the United States, where we tend to eat more of because we have canned beans, we have them more accessible in packaging. These chickpeas, red chickpeas, red kidney beans, navy beans, pinto beans, those are beans that'll produce more gas. So if you want to incorporate more beans, try these other ones, these more lentil type beans. So how we can use beans in our day-to-day diet. So I like incorporating beans rather than substituting foods in my diet. I like adding beans to things that would not normally contain beans, like a lasagna. You can just add some black beans or pinto beans into a lasagna. You can use half ground beef. If you're making tacos, you can use half ground beef and half lentils or black beans and mix it up. You end up eating less ground beef and you have more fiber from the beans, and you extend that dish with the beans. So it's a cost-effective way to make a high fiber meal. You can also use beans in a spread like hummus. You can substitute mayonnaise for hummus. You can use it as a great dip. You can add beans with rice and beans like this side dish here with some cilantro in it. There are great recipes for black bean brownies. And then I found a couple of recipes about chocolate chip cookies. So these are all great ways to incorporate more fiber. And all these photos are very colorful too and look delicious. All right, so preparing your beans. So if you're using dry beans, which I like to use because it's cost effective and they last a long time on the shelf, it's important to soak your beans prior to cooking. This helps reduce the oligosaccharide load that you'll be putting in your body. So soaking dry beans for 8 hours is recommended. Some people really like using salt water and making a kind of a saltwater brine in with the beans. This adds some flavor. But after soaking for about 8 hours, you want to discard that soaking liquid and then proceed to cooking it in fresh water or stock. If you're short on time, you can boil your beans quickly. You can boil them for 2 to 3 minutes, remove from the heat, cover with a lid, and let it sit for about an hour. This is like a speed soak. You drain off the water, and then you add fresh water or stock, and then you proceed to cook. This will help with gas in the future. So there are multiple ways to cook beans. You can cook them in an Instant Pot, which is pretty fast. So all of these methods are after soaking. So in an Instant Pot, it'll cook the beans in about 25 to 40 minutes, depending on the type of bean. A lot of beans have different cook times because of their shell. Some of them are harder shells than others, or thicker shells or thinner shells. So you have to maybe a recipe would indicate the length of time, or just reading up a little bit about the dried bean. You can cook the dried bean or the soaked bean on the stovetop for 1 to 3 hours in a slow cooker. So after soaking overnight for 8 hours, you can then proceed to cook them for 8 hours and have beans by the next evening. And then I found a great recipe cooking them in the oven. So you can soak your beans, put a pound of beans in a Dutch oven with a lid, add your water or stock. You heat them up so the water is hot for about 10 minutes, and then you put it into a 350-degree oven for about an hour or until they're cooked and tender. That's kind of nice because you just kind of set them and forget them in the oven for an hour, and it's off the stovetop. Something to remember, about 1 cup of dry beans equals 3 cups of cooked beans. So they do expand and create some volume. And then 1 can of beans, so a traditional 15-ounce can, contains about 2 cups of beans. So that's some great information to keep in mind as you're planning your bean consumption and preparation. So beans, as I mentioned in the previous slide, the ones that are more traditional in our that are available in our diet here, they tend to taste somewhat similar, but they do have different textures and uses. So a lot of beans they pair well with herbs, a variety of different herbs. Black beans are great with cilantro, cumin, limes, parsley, onions, garlic. Meat or bacon is a nice addition to flavor a pot of beans. Adding an acid after cooking with lemons or tomatoes is lovely, or limes. And then obviously adequately salting your beans is important. It's important to know that when you add acid, don't add acid too soon. Don't add your can of tomatoes too soon, or else it'll toughen the outer skin of the bean. I learned this early on before I knew all of this information. I thought, oh, I'm making chili. I'm going to add my beans. I'm going to start cooking them. And then, oh, they're going to absorb some delicious tomato juice. Those beans never softened. And I was pretty disappointed because the chili was going to taste delicious, but the beans were just they weren't hard as rock, but they were really firm and chalky. So I kind of ruined that batch of beans and learned that adding tomatoes or lemon juice too soon to dry beans is a big no-no. So add them later after they're done fully cooking. It's important to choose the right bean for the right application. So I am sharing this link with you. The Bean Institute is a great place to find recipes and information about beans. But there's a nice list of beans and how long they cook and what are some great uses for those beans. But beans come in different sizes and they cook differently. So knowing what you want from a bean, that sounds funny, but knowing what you want in a bean, there's a particular bean for that use. So you wouldn't want a bean that breaks down and gets super mushy in a soup. You really want one that holds its shape. So go to the Bean Institute and see what bean should you use for your particular dish. And then there's it's not new because these are very old ancient beans, but heirloom beans are becoming more readily available. Not only are they unique in flavor, they are beautiful. Sometimes I will get heirloom beans just because they're so beautiful. Look at this black and white bean and this purple bean. Unfortunately, they don't stay this beautiful after they cook. All the colors sort of blend together. But there are some great heirloom beans out there. And the lucky winner from this presentation who fills out the survey at the end will receive 2 pounds of heirloom beans delivered to your home. So be sure to pick out or finish that survey once it's launched or sent to you. Heirloom beans are they have a very different flavor than the traditional beans that we have in the grocery store. They have a nutty, earthy, kind of a savory flavor. They're very distinct from the more commonly available beans. So I encourage you to try them out if you want to have a new experience with beans. So this is halfway through, so I'm going to transition over to the kitchen, but today I'm going to demonstrate how to make a pretty simple, straightforward bean burger. And I will talk to you over in the kitchen, but I need to transition over there. So I'm going to stop this and move over there. I'll see you over there.
So as Katie transitions over, Katie McFarland, would you like to launch poll number 1? It has 4 questions, kind of hidden which one it is. But Katie Hickok just mentioned that there is an opportunity to complete a survey following your participation in today's class. And in just a moment after we conclude this poll, this is actually poll number 2. So could you please share poll that has 4 questions? I know the title is so long, it's hard to see that part. It was Katie McFarland is sharing that poll. We would appreciate if you would just share with us your a little bit about you. There's just 4 quick questions. We promise we try to make it quick and painless. But just, have you attended an extension class before? And then, is this your first time in the Get the Dish series? We love to see if someone is returning or new to this series. What is your experience level with cooking beans, which is this really great topic today? I'm learning so much. It's really insightful for me. And then just how many individuals are joining with you today? And so if you wouldn't mind completing that, we really appreciate it. And then, as you've probably guessed, we'll have another poll at the conclusion of Katie Hickok's presentation today. So we appreciate you just taking that quick moment to complete that. I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. But I did want to announce that for Amy Robertson's presentation on Deliciously Gluten-Free, that was last week's presentation, that we had the winner of that survey, and Amy announced that the winner of the raffle survey would be receiving 2 donut pans, and that winner is Sandra Kim. So Sandra will be receiving contact from Amy Robertson, who will be working with her to get her those donut pans. So congratulations. And then, as Katie Hickok hinted at you today, if you complete today's survey following this presentation, you'll be entered into the drawing for those 2 pounds of heirloom beans, and then we'll announce the winner next week. So with that, Katie, we can see your setup, and if you want to take it away.
All right.
So we hate that.
All right. That wasn't the plan. That wasn't
double mic, but we can see you just great, Katie.
Wonderful. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to make a black bean burger. This is the beautiful bean burger. It looks good. This is a new recipe to me, and I made it earlier today, and it turned out really well. So first things first, it calls for 2 cans of black beans. So I'm using canned beans today just for ease of use, but you can definitely cook up your own pot of beans and then measure out 28 ounces of beans, so about 4 cups. So this will make 4 fairly big bean burgers. So the first part of the instructions, I poured the can of beans, I rinsed them, drained them, and then I put them onto a sheet tray, and I put them into the oven to dry out any excess liquid that might be on the bean. This also dries out some of the beans, so it'll help absorb some of the extra moisture that we're adding. So we have our can of beans that have been dried. And then the recipe also calls for half of an onion, and I sauteed the onion ahead of time,
I'll go right here. I sauteed the onion ahead of time, and I also added some corn and zucchini. The recipe we'll be sharing with you says you can add, says you add bell pepper. I opted to experiment and try zucchini, and I added corn. So, and it worked well. So you can, moving forward, you can add really any vegetable you'd like. I sauteed it just to make sure that it softened a little bit. For this recipe, you'll need a food processor, but it's not necessary. You can mash it with a potato masher or a fork if you don't have a food processor. But I have all of the ingredients gathered, so I will talk you through it. First, we're going to add our beans. I need a spatula. It's right here. So we're going to add our beans into the food processor. Then we're going to add our onion and vegetable mix. I prepped these ahead of time so everything is cool. And then to this, we're going to add some cumin. So I mentioned earlier how black beans go really well with some cumin, garlic powder, smoked paprika, oregano, and then also I'm adding balsamic vinegar, but you can also add Worcestershire sauce, and then a couple pinches of salt. And then we're going to grind this up or process it a little bit. We want it to be a little chunky. We don't want it to be a smooth puree. We just want to pulse it until everything's sort of chopped up lightly. All right. So that is perfect. Let me show you. So it's chopped. It's not completely a puree, but it's nice. It'll work well. Get this out of the way. We're going to pour the contents into a bowl. I'm on a webinar right now. To this, we're going to add 2 eggs. I'm going to wash my hands. So when I have made bean burgers in the past, I know they were kind of, or when I order them in a restaurant, some of them can be really crumbly and then sort of break apart. Some of them are just super mushy. And I found that this recipe actually makes a kind of a perfect burger. They stay formed and are really flavorful and have a great texture. You can also add grated carrots or grated beets if you have those on hand. I feel like this is a great base for adding even more fiber. So I like adding I cracked the eggs in, mixed it all up so everything is nice and coated. And then I have a half of a cup of breadcrumbs or panko breadcrumbs. All right, so stirring it up so it's all mixed. And then I think you can see this well enough. So this bean burger recipe will make about 4 large bean burger patties. If you want smaller ones, you can make smaller ones.
This would also make really great meatballs. They hold their shape really well once they're cooked. So I feel like this is just a great base recipe for many different opportunities for the bean burger. So I am going to make about, I'm going to pack the ball. This is about what, baseball? I'm going to make them first. So I'm going to just make all the ball shapes first, and then I'll press them once they're shaped. So I'll do one more and then I will keep going. So then once you get your ball shaped, they are it's a pretty, so I'm using a sheet paper, and then I'm taking the ball and just pressing it gently with my hand. And I'm kind of creating a ball shape with my palm, so then it keeps it all together. But you can also just pick it up and gently pat it and form it into a ball or into a patty. So again, they hold their shape really well. And you're going to just put them right onto the baking sheet. I'm reusing the sheet that I used to dry out the beans. They won't spread, so you can put them fairly close together. And these are going into a 375-degree oven for about 15 to 20 minutes until they're a bit golden. Halfway through, so set a timer for 7 minutes, and you can flip them over, and then they'll brown a little bit on each side. So let me wash my hands and I'll show you the end product. So this is the end product. You can see that they look a bit dry, but once you add your mayonnaise, your mustard, your ketchup, it'll help moisten them up. But they hold their shape really well. They look nice. This is a great recipe to make ahead of time. So when they're in the process, when they're in the shape, right after you shape them, before you bake them, you can just put these into the oven, freeze them until they're solid, and then pack them into a Ziploc bag. And then you have a quick, easy dinner, but they do need to be heated and fully cooked because of that raw egg. You could also freeze them in this form. You just run the risk of having them dry out a little bit more. But that is the simple bean burger, and I hope you all enjoy it. This is just a beautiful representation of the bean burger. Do we have any questions? I know I went a little fast. It took a half hour. So if there are any questions about beans, or if you have any burning questions, let's hear them. I see Maureen says, can you saute in canola oil? Absolutely. Whatever oil you have on hand. We used olive oil just because that's what we had. And you can use any sort of bean. So we used black bean for this one. You could use a white bean, a navy bean, whatever bean you have on hand. Any other questions?
And so, Katie, there were some questions that came into the chat, but Katie McFarland answered some of those. How do you dry beans? And so she shared that. There was a great question about the difference, in paprika and chili pepper. And so Katie did answer those. But I had a question, you mentioned that gas quite a bit. And so would you have any additional information about that gas and handling that, kind of combating that, if you will, especially someone who may be newly introducing beans into their diet, or maybe a sudden increase, maybe
Right.
what you would recommend there?
We don't recommend suddenly increasing your fiber. If you're eating 10 grams of fiber a day and then you want to just jump up to 30, we don't recommend doing that overnight because you will get constipated and you'll have gas and cramping and it won't be fun and you probably won't proceed. You'll probably stop eating all the fiber. So we recommend slowly increasing your fiber intake. So as I mentioned before, a tablespoon of beans a day if you're not eating beans at all. And then slowly increase to a quarter cup to half a cup. I would also recommend, if you're using dried beans, soak them. The longer you soak them, if 8 hours is about maximum to get the oligosaccharides kind of out or reduce that effect, and also cooking them thoroughly, making sure that those beans are soft and they don't have any of that starchy the starchy texture to the dry bean. And then drinking plenty of water, moving, and then not holding your gas in. I know some people, I'm not speaking for myself, but some people will hold their gas in, especially if they're in a public place, but just step outside and pass your gas because everyone does it and it's nothing to be ashamed of, but it can be embarrassing at times. If you know you're going to be going on a trip, or if you're on an airplane, maybe wait and after your trip to incorporate more fiber so you're not sitting on the airplane with a belly full of gas.
Great, Katie. Thank you for sharing that. I know that that's sometimes something that people encounter a little bit too late. And so that sudden increase.
I know a lot of people who avoid beans altogether because it gives them gas. And it's disappointing because they're missing out on some great fiber, some great protein, all those vitamins and minerals I had mentioned before. And it's just it's an affordable way to get extra protein in your diet. So for those people who completely avoid them and want to incorporate more beans into your diet, yeah, go slow and just gently add more beans into your diet each day.
Great. Eric asked a question. Can you make these bean burgers with the less gassy beans from your list?
I think so. The less gassy beans were lentils, they're the orange colored split peas. It would work definitely. You may need to have more of a binder. You may need to do a little more prep work because you can't just go and get a can of those lentils off the shelf. So you'll need to make sure those are soaked and cooked properly or long enough before you use them. But that's a great question.
So I have a question. Do you have any other favorite things that you like to make with beans that you have a lot, I guess, often, or that just fun recipes for people to be thinking about?
I challenge myself to incorporate beans into at least one of my meals each day. So if that means it's on a salad or if it's with my dinner, I will just find a way to add them. And one of the easiest ways to add beans is just to put a quarter cup or half a cup on top of a salad. And you can go straight from the can, rinse them off, put them on your salad, or you can do a little light dressing on them beforehand. So you can toss some of the beans in like a nice vinaigrette with some lemon juice, some herbs, and then put that on top of your salad. And it can kind of act as the dressing also, and it can have just another extra flavor. I know some people like to bake or get those crunchy beans, so they will take garbanzo beans, kind of toss them in some olive oil, salt and pepper, chili powder, and they'll bake the beans for like 20 to 30 minutes at 400 degrees or until they're crunchy. And that is a great salad topper to add to salads, to add to soups. It will add a nice crunch, especially if you bake them long enough that you get all of the moisture out and they just add a nice crunch. But you can use any beans for that purpose. So if you want to use, I remember the Azuki beans were the less gassy ones. So you can try doing that. But Amy, really have you tried the black bean brownie recipe? I think we both shared a black bean brownie recipe.
I made black bean brownies. I taught an in-person gluten-free class last Thursday, and we made black bean brownies for part of that. And they're delicious. And I see Diana in the chat said black bean brownies, and I agree. While it might not be the healthiest way to add beans to your diet, at least it is one way to sneak them in there.
Yeah, it's one way to have that exposure to the bean. So you're still getting that little bit of exposure. So you may not be as gassy one day. Savory bean smoothie. Oh yes. You could, white beans are a great addition to a smoothie. They add a nice velvety texture. I didn't really mention much about soybeans, but tofu is, silken tofu is another fabulous way to add beans to a smoothie. It makes it really velvety.
So there was a question that came in. It's how can you add more beans into your diet when you're watching your carbs due to diabetes?
That's a great question. And when I was working with diabetic patients, that was a food that it's a gray area food. So that means it may not affect your blood sugar. It depends on how it's prepared. Every body is different. So you'd have to work with your doctor. You'd have to experiment, check your blood sugar after eating the beans. But beans have a lot of fiber in them, and 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup. If you incorporate that into a diet, it should not affect your blood sugar as much as, but I'm hesitant to say that because everybody is different, but also I'm not talking about like baked beans. So baked beans can be loaded with sugar. So I'm talking about just straight up beans with maybe some flavoring, like herbs and spices, nothing with added sugars. But I highly encourage you to add more beans and to watch how it affects your blood sugar. So check it maybe an hour or 2 after you consume the beans and see how it affects your blood sugar. Also, we tend to not eat beans by themselves. So I mentioned before, eating beans with rice or with other grains. So those foods will raise your blood sugar, definitely. But the beans, when eaten by themselves, because of the fiber, because they pass through the digestion, they shouldn't have a huge effect on blood sugar. I hope that was a helpful roundabout answer. It's a great question, but it's hard to make a solid answer because everybody is different and responds differently to foods.
So there was a question, when you share recipes with the follow-up, will there be a black bean brownie recipe?
We can make sure there is a black bean brownie recipe.
I can share mine if you don't already have one.
Well, great. With that, as we still have individuals on, we're going to go ahead and launch our second poll for today. And with that, relaunch, there we go. So if you wouldn't mind filling out this quick poll, it's just, after attending today, do you plan to attend some more extension classes that are being offered? Did you enjoy the lesson today? And then do you plan to cook some beans? We've spent a lot of time talking about beans. We have the perfect weather for some of those nice savory dishes. And so go for it, Katie.
Type the word yes if you plan to add more beans into your diet. I'm just curious. We didn't include that in the poll question, but I'm curious to see how many people plan to add more beans into your diet after this introduction to beans. But slowly, I like it.
Want to be
I-
careful.
When I was gathering the information about the vitamins and minerals in beans, I was impressed by what they contain. So every bean has different ratios of vitamins and minerals and protein and fiber. So keep that in mind. So a lot of Americans are deficient or lower in like magnesium and zinc. So adding just a half a cup to a cup of beans can really help you increase your overall health and vitamins and minerals. Ooh, looking for new spices to use with them. Yeah. I've been experimenting with za'atar. I don't know if you've had that. It's a spice blend and it's kind of sour. It's kind of spicy. It's a great, I think it would pair really well with beans. I think smoked paprika would be a great addition to a pot of beans. It would add a smokiness. Something else. So someone cooked a pot of pinto beans for the week. So yes, cooking, like prepping your beans ahead of time is fantastic. It makes it easy to incorporate. Having a variety of beans available is another tip I would say, is maybe cooking a few, maybe include one of the lower gassy beans. So then you can incorporate different ones with different dishes and have a variety of those different flavors so you don't get burnt out on one type of bean. Za'atar, Z-A-A-T-A-R. There, I think it's like that. Oop, I just sent it to the panelists. I already eat beans 4 to 5 days per week. Fantastic. Moroccan chili. That sounds wonderful. But thank you all for hopping on, and I hope you learned something new about beans. I learned about an heirloom bean company here in Idaho, and I hope to purchase some of those beans to share with you. I'm also a part of a bean club out of California called Rancho Gordo. I think there might be just 3 big companies that are growing or producing and selling heirloom beans, but I'll be sending a variety. Yep, Zerson heirloom beans. That's the one that is in Idaho. How long can cooked beans stay in the refrigerator? Ooh, that's a food safety question. Can you correct me if I'm wrong, Serene? I would say 5 days max.
We recommend a 4-day or throwaway rule. So we love to utilize that food. We definitely don't want to be contributing to food waste. So when you are cooking up food, we want you to be consuming that within 4 days, or you can always freeze that. You know, that's something that Katie talked about today. You could freeze that food so that you could have it for a different time. So
Yeah,
4 days.
freezing them. Yep. I went to school with someone who I lived with her. She made a big pot, 5 pounds of dry beans. She had a ton of beans and froze them in little Ziploc baggies, and also did rice. She could just come home from class and just pull out rice and beans and have a complete protein and top it with some cheese and squeeze of lime. It was a very cost-effective way to get some good nutrition in. When I do food inspection in 7 days, everyone, And beans also will tell you when they're done. If they smell really bad, I don't want to eat smelly beans personally. So if you cook your beans and then they're in the fridge, eat them you cut out right when you told me how many days cooked beans can be in the fridge. How many days?
Oh, I did 4 days.
Right, you cut, okay, so 4 days. So on day 4, if they're smelly, you feel free to toss them.
Yes. So I know we had someone share in the chat, those food service industry allowables. And so that recommendation for the 4-day or throwaway is just based on consumers and the way that we don't always food date and wanting to make sure we have the highest safety as well as nutrition of our food products. So